Alright, hello, I'm Charles from JTech, and today I'm going to be explaining to you torque converters, what they are, and how they work. So basically, I drew this very detailed diagram over here. A torque converter is used with an automatic transmission, and it takes power from the engine through liquid and turns it into power to the transmission, which goes to the wheels and so on and so forth. So how that works is that you have several parts. You have the turbine, the impeller, the stator, and your other stuff. So power from the engine goes through the shaft to the flex plate, which, if you're familiar with manual transmissions, you usually have a flywheel. But the flex plate is for automatics. It bolts the torque converter to the flex plate so the engine drives torque converter. Now here it drives this part. This part's called the turbine, which is driven by the engine. I know it seems weird to have the engine drive this side, but it's for efficiency because there's a fluid pump in here that keeps pressure in the torque converter, and that's very important for it to work. It needs pressure and it needs to stay moving, and if you're driving this side, it's a whole bunch of engineering stuff that nobody wants to do. So it's just simpler, easier, and makes everybody's lives, that much less complicated. So the turbine spins, and as it spins, it slings fluid out. So let me get the marker here. So basically what's happening is that you have a circle. Let's pretend this is the turbine, and you have these fins. All right. So what happens is that as it spins, right? As it spins, the fluid flows out. This is known as centrifugal force, or the centrifugal effect. So, as you see with this flings the fluid out, and because the fins are angled, like I showed you over here, the fin angled, the fluid flows out, goes around, and then hits the impeller, which is connected to the input shaft of the transmission. So the fluid flows out, moves here, and it pushes. Slowly but surely it pushes this, and that moves the transmission, which moves the wheels. And then there's this third thing called the stator. And what that does is when the fluid comes around and hits the stator, it gets flung in the opposite direction. So it travels through here, gets flung back. And what this does is that it multiplies torque. It's kind of like if you're an astronaut in space, you can't really move until you have something to push off of. So the fluid flows here, gets slung around, hits the stator, and gets redirected. And it creates a flow called a vortex flow. So essentially it's like a slinky, if you hold a slinky in a circle. And that's the vortex flow. And this is what's called stall, which is different than stall in a manual, which nobody wants stall in a manual. And then as the impeller begins to move faster, you need less torque to move because the car is always already going. So that's when you reach your circular flow, which there's a couple spirals here and there, but not too many. And this is when you reach a thing called coupling, and at this point it's just a fluid coupling, which is basically where this fluid spins this section and it drives it. There's another part called a lock-up clutch, I believe it's the lock-up. Yeah, lock-up clutch, which is sort of like a regular clutch. You got a little piston here and a clutch there, and it locks these pieces together so you have essentially a one-to-one drive. And this is for high speed, low torque, like when you're driving at the highway and you're doing 60 miles an hour trying to get to grandma's house to get your pork chops or something, but that is essentially how it works. So to recap, the engine puts energy to the flex plate, which moves the outer casing, which slings fluid out and around to this side, which moves the impeller, and then it hits the stator, which redirects it and multiplies torque and creates a vortex flow. And then, as the impeller starts moving faster and faster and driving the transmission, the stator starts moving too, and then you get this circle flow. And then that's when you reach, like circle flow, that's when you reach coupling. And then when you get 100%, that's when you activate the lockdown clutch, or lockup clutch, which makes this basically the engine drives the transmission straight up, and you got pretty efficient right there. That's pretty much it. Thank you for watching.